Okie dokie, we've made it. Welcome to the final 2022 draft recap. Interesting team to watch draft over the last little while. I think this year went okay. But the thing I did really like was Brad Lambert, and this is the one that everyone's probably looking forward to. You know, look, the way I see it, and this was explained to me by Jordan Millette, who is now with Puck Preps, a very smart guy most of the time. He brought up an interesting point of, I didn't meet a single Finnish scout who really liked Brad Lambert this year. I don't think there was a single one that I could find. If you have your Finnish scouts and they're going, don't draft this guy, and the Swedish guys are like, we really like this Philip Bistad guy, or insert any other Swedish player that went first, there are lots of Swedish scouts that liked Jonathan Lekkerimäki or Philip Bistad or Noah Östlund this year. You're going to listen to the guys that you pay to look in their areas and go, this guy is good. When I look at Brad Lambert, I see a player who was dramatically misused and horrifically placed and ended up on a worse team than the one he started on, who put him in a role where he could have been basically any player at all. I mean, there are issues with his game, but I mean, I watched a lot of hockey this year, and I feel like Brad Lambert, he almost went outside the first round in this year's draft, and that to me is absolutely crazy. But he is flawed. He's a player that needs to work on seeing options and executing on them quicker in the offensive zone especially. He's a player that, I mean, a lot of people are faulting his compete, and I just don't see it. I don't see the reason for concern there. But a lot of the times when I think his defense looked poor was because his team was always on the defensive rather than pushing pace and pushing play offensively. Maybe part of that is his fault, but I really have a hard time seeing this bad of a player out of Brad Lambert than what I was hearing. So I have huge hopes for him. I think he's a great pick, but I think Brad Lambert could be a great player if things go right. And speaking of which, they took Seamus Casey, who I think looking back I might have had ranked a little high based on when I was looking back at the tape going into the draft of what I had, but I still love Seamus Casey and think there's a tremendous amount of upside. He's a player that I absolutely buy the argument of it's not about what he is now, it's about what he is in 5 years. And I think that if you work on his skating pretty much exclusively, you're going to get a heck of a player. Like, he's wired to be a creative and dynamic offensive player. You know, really, really impressive skill level, really impressive mobility. Just needs to work on that speed generation, escape speed, and getting more involved in play than he was this year. But when he was a heck of a player. So to get him in the middle of the second round, I think is great value. I really, really like Seamus Casey. Maybe not as much as where I had him ranked at 12th in retrospect, but he was easily a contender in the first round. And for me, I expected him to be a later first round pick, but he also doesn't have a ton of size, and that devalues him. So good on taking the plunge on him. I think that could pay out really, really well for them. Then they drafted Theo Wahlberg, though. I liked him a lot more than I liked Jorian Donovan and Cameron O'Neill, so I thought that was a really neat pickup in that range. Like, I didn't have him ranked, but if someone brought his name up, I'd go, yeah, you know what, let's take a chance on him. He's 6'3", I think. He's a pretty big kid, rangy. He's got some skill. He sees the ice really well. Makes a good first pass. As much as that sounds boring, it counts. You know, it counts for something. You know, and if you can leverage the skill and maybe get him to turn that sort of lateral fluidity and mobility into getting pucks up the ice himself and sort of engaging a little more offensively, then maybe there could be something there for Theo Wahlberg. I was a fan of that pick. Alexander Paravalov at 70. I kind of liked Paravalov from time to time. I think that there's potential with his game. He just needs to settle into a style of play that works for him. He's got skill. He's resilient. He's got a bit of size as well. It's just a matter of he was trying a lot of things and trying to be extremely creative one-on-one, and it just didn't work out for him very much. But figuring all that out, I think, will take him a ways. I mean, I think he could maybe be a third-line sort of two-way guy without a huge set of expectations for him. But yeah, I liked Paravalov in that range, sure. I may have nitpicked some other guys in that range, but I had him ranked at 59, so getting him at 70, sure. They drafted Artyom Duda. I mean, look, again, I watched a lot of Krasnaya Armia this year. Duda is a decently skilled player, but he always struck me as a CHL-style defenseman playing in the MHL. And when you do that, you stick out a lot. I just don't think that there's a ton of real upside there with Duda. He played a lot on the power play when Gradinin probably should have been playing on the power play, in my view. I don't know. I see a lot of work to do with Duda because I don't know really what the trademark of his game is, and I don't really know what his weaknesses are because he's kind of all around fine in the MHL, and he just produced a lot on the power play. So we'll see what happens with Duda, but there were a lot of players I would have taken ahead of him. They took Arseny Koromislov, who is a guy who, again, I wasn't a fan of this year watching him. I liked Koromislov not this past season, but the year before with the same team with SKA 1946. The skill is there. I think he plays with some good confidence, but we'll see how it goes in terms of projecting past this level because I don't know if I see it. At 120 was Matthew Semenoff. And, Matthew Semenoff is just a nice swing late. A lot of people were really hyping him up early in the year when he was scoring a ton of points, and every time I watched him, I just felt that he's a good auxiliary offensive player. He's not the biggest guy, he's not the heaviest guy, he's not the fastest, not the most skilled, but relatively smart, knows what to do with the puck. Hitting his targets was a bit of an issue in my tracking, but he's a physical player in terms of intensity level, and he sort of can work off of maybe some skilled guys down the road, I think, pretty well if you set your sort of expectations low. And look, Semenoff could be a thing. I wasn't a huge fan of Jorian Donovan. I saw him in person a couple of times this year in Hamilton. Wasn't really blown away with what I was seeing. I don't know. Is there something there? I can't say there isn't, but he wasn't really on my list, and he wouldn't have been a guy that I draft. He's another one of these CHL defenders where I'm going, maybe just because of the fact that he's a CHL guy, it puts him higher up on boards or coaches like him more based on how he plays. And I just, in terms of impact, don't really see a whole lot there for Donovan down the road. Jack Devine, I had him ranked at 79, and he just kept falling down my board over the year. He put up some pretty good data in the NCAA with the University of Denver, but I was wondering when he was going to, put it all together and really sort of take over. He wasn't really moving pace very much. He wasn't really pushing the game in his direction. He wasn't really playing with a ton of skill. A lot of hard work. He's physically resilient. Again, he's another one of these guys that just sort of earns what he gets through being that resilient and hardworking guy. I expected more out of him this year, but I still think you could have done way, way worse. I expect him, he's already in college, and I expect him to get better. I could see him being a bottom 6 NHL player, and I was surprised even if I thought he kind of was going to fall a bit in the draft relative to his evaluations coming into the draft. Ben Hemmerling, a guy who I watched a little bit as the year went on. I mean, I found that his skill was pretty good. He could pull pucks around and stop up and change pace pretty well. His stride was pretty inefficient. I just felt like he wasn't really going places very efficiently, which is fixable. And I just get the feeling with Hemmerling that, we'll see. I don't have huge expectations, but he could be a guy who evolves into a better junior scorer than he is now. He was pretty good with Everett this year, showed some pretty good skills, showed some pretty good sort of ability to change and deceive players, change pace and deceive players in transition and such. I didn't see enough out of Ben Hemmerling where I'm going, I'm going to rank this guy, which, is not the end of the world. I've been wrong before, but with Hemmerling, when I checked him out post-draft as well, I wasn't, late round pick, sure, whatever, take a flyer and see what happens. So relatively straightforward, but I thought they did really well. I think they honestly, with the volume of picks they had and where they picked the guys and who they had, I think a 1D, all things considered, again, I think with those higher picks, they did well. It's just with they had sort of these mid to late round guys, and I like the swings. And Seamus Casey, look, it's a no-brainer to take a chance on Seamus Casey and say, hey, let's send him to college, see where he is in 3 years, and let him figure out how to get around the ice a little bit better, because I think that's the main thing that holds him back. So, with that being said, that's it. We're done.